Okay, in this video we're going to use what I refer to as I'm just giving you a harmonic lick, okay? It's ascending melodic minor sequence with a secondary dominant. Ascending melodic minor meaning using the chords of ascending melodic minor but going backwards. And I have a free course on this, plus chromatic harmony, where the secondary dominant function kind of lies. And in the second look at melodic minor, I use all the possible diatonic chords of ascending melodic minor, but in forwards and backwards directions. And the other thing is, it makes learning modes like mixolydian, flat six so much easier when you know how to use these, because they use kind of like the same moves. So I'll put the links of these two in the description, of course. Now, one of the interesting things is I actually didn't learn how to use ascending melodic minor chords from jazz theory. I actually learned it from Tchaikovsky. That was the first time I saw it. So again, we're going to deal with chords only derived in melodic minor and secondary dominant. Just use 5 of 5, flat 9. We're going to use that chord. So I cover that in those courses, how to use those things. And the entire opening I stuck in here is based off of ascending melodic minor chords. And that's the entire reason I wrote that beginning. So before we get into the exercise, this is where I learned it from. And my philosophy is learn theory from theory books as much as you can, but learn actual harmonic moves from composers. They're the ones that often break all the theory rules that you read and often give you the cool moves, not the theory books. So sorry, my screen froze. Here's a sequence. And you're actually not going to learn many moves like this in theory books because they don't deal with the ascending chords much. Now again, someone like this did. He may do something like, let's just make some up. Some kind of fading away sequence. With a pedal point, and that's what I did. Now Tchaikovsky would do something like that, but maybe with a high amount of tremolo and orchestration that's much more elaborate than I can do on keyboard. So let's start. We got a minor 1, a 5, first inversion, half diminished 6 chord, flat 9 of 5, flat 9 dominant, secondary dominant of 5. Again, I cover moves like secondary dominants all the way to 13ths in my course. So now here's something you start noticing the better you are at harmony. This move right here is almost like a 2-5-1 in G minor, except with a Picardy third. So it makes sense that this would actually work in C minor. You start to see these little small details like this. That part of the ascending melodic minor in C minor is almost like a 2-5-1 in G minor, but with a Picardy third. Now here's something else to notice. Pivot points can be that G chord, that's the 4 chord of D melodic minor. So you start seeing stuff like this. The stronger your harmonic vocabulary becomes, you start seeing pivot chords where you never saw them before. So the opening sequence used a similar thing, so you could use that pivot point on the 5 chord, treat it as the new 4 chord of your new minor key. So that's the 4 chord of E melodic minor. So we have created a good way to practice this. You could just continue this and it'll work 6 times. Move. Modulate. Pivot. So I'm going to stop here. So we've done 2 things. We're memorizing this, and we also created a harmonic pivot sequence. So what I would do now is that will occur 6 times before you repeat. So I would start it in somewhere like B, okay? Just a half step down. And this will reoccur 6 times. But again, we have a harmonic pivoting sequence. So it's one of our harmonic licks now. We could use it in key or out of key, and I'm going to show you in a second. So keeping the same tonal center, for instance, let's say, let's do C Dorian and chords that are possibly in C Dorian. and then do this move with it to close it out. So instead of doing this traditionally taught natural minor downward, melodic minor upward, we could use Dorian in place of natural minor. And then by doing so, we could make Dorian have a very strong conclusion sequence. Starting on Dorian, using that ascending melodic minor sequence. So we had the Dorian aspect. This is very Dorian, typical Dorian chord movement right here. Now we had this descending melodic minor chords with a secondary dominant. So now instead of mixing natural minor with melodic minor, we're mixing Dorian with melodic minor and a secondary dominant. So another quick application, we could use the F that naturally occurs in ascending melodic minor chords and pivot to B flat minor, as like it's a 5 chord. For a really dramatic sudden pivot, you could do stuff like that. There's no rules that say you cannot. So again, like I said, the stronger your harmonic language gets, even with just basic triads, the more you start seeing these pivot opportunities where you'd never see them before. And they work out really nicely, especially when you're actually writing music. So these would be good tools for people who want to get into like film composition and whatnot, but they're also good for dramatic composition because people like Ralph Vaughan Williams will actually use moves like this all the time and use pivots where people don't normally see those pivot chords. That's what makes his modalism so interesting, is because he does use those interesting pivots that nobody sees because their brain's too stuck in functional harmony. And right here we're demonstrating a way to be unstuck from functional harmony by pivoting off the 5 chord, which is the 4 chord in another ascending melodic minor scale. So there again, there's another benefit of memorizing all this stuff and all these types of moves. Turn them into harmonic licks, and eventually you start seeing and building your own harmonic language, and you start seeing pivot chords, like I said, where you'd never ever think to ever look for them before. And also, I can't restate the importance of going historically too, because you want to see what makes a certain sound the way it does. And if you do this historically, by the time you get to modern times, I guarantee you nothing will confuse you that you read through. Nothing. Especially if you do a lot of harmonic memorization. Now, I intentionally do avoid certain styles like jazz and rock on here because they're very popular on YouTube, and that's why I don't talk much about them. But I do love jazz and I do love rock, and I actually do like stuff like hip hop and everything, but I'm intentionally showing you stuff that I had to figure out on my own because the theory books have failed to show me these things. Whereas methodically doing a lot of memorization and studying historic composers all the way to modern times has actually done way more than the theory books could ever teach me.